Hello there, and thank you for tuning in to Town Meeting TV's coverage of Town Meeting Day 2025. My name is Emily Brewer, and this program is part of a series of candidate forums and budget presentations hosted by Town Meeting TV in advance of the Town Meeting Day election that will be on Tuesday, March 4th this year. These forums are made possible by Town Meeting TV's generous underwriting partners. Thank you very much. You can find all our forums at cctv.org/TMD2025 or on our Town Meeting TV YouTube channel where auto-generated captions are available. If you're tuning in on YouTube, click the subscribe button to stay tuned into local democracy this election season. On tonight's program, we will hear from 3 representatives from the Champlain Valley School District about their proposed FY26 school budget. Those guests are School Board Chair Meghan Metzler, Superintendent Adam Bunting, and Chief Operating Officer Gary Marckres. Yes. And before we get started and jump into their presentation, I would just like to let folks know that if you are tuning in live, we welcome your questions at 802-862-3966. If you call in, we will answer your question because there's no questions for me, so I'm sure Megan, Gary, and Adam would love to answer your questions. With that being said, we can get started with the presentation.
Perfect, thanks, Emily. So FY26 budget is something for anyone who's been following our district, you would know that Adam is actually our new superintendent. He was our newest superintendent effective July 1st, and I think we gave him we didn't even give him up until July 1st before we started talking to him about the budget. It was really one of the first things that we started talking to him about. And obviously that's because of just everything that happened with our FY25 budget. So we knew that we had a lot of challenges entering this budget process and this budget season. And what were those challenges? So the challenges are really Act 127 tax redistribution, which is really just a way of saying that Act 127 really changed the tax capacity of districts like CVSD. We actually were the second most impacted in the whole state, and we lost 17% of our tax capacity. So situations like that are how you end up with having, for FY25, a 5% increase in your spending, leading to an average increase in taxes of 17%. As part of that, we had to have process lined out how we would address Act 127. The way that the state legislature addressed that really late in the game last year was through something called H850, where instead of kind of having a static overall flat taxes, we have for a 5-year period, it was supposed to be flat pre-CLA tax increase of 5%. We got a declining tax discount. So really, it's really complicated, but we know that over a 5-year period, assuming the legislation doesn't change, we will have declining discounts on our tax rate that came from the state. We also have an enrollment trend decrease. If you look at in a couple of slides, we'll talk about how we've lost our enrollment trends have been declining, and I think we've lost almost 200 students over the past couple of years. And then everyone knows, has talked about healthcare costs as it relates to education spending. And this year, we know that we expect increases of 11.9% in our healthcare costs, and that's after even larger increases last year. Mm-hmm. And then finally, education fund sustainability. Anyone who's been following taxes or has been following property taxes or anything about education finance in the state of Vermont knows that it's a real area of focus for both the governor, the legislature, and we know that there's a lot of unknowns out there today. So everything that we're talking about today is based on what we know as of today.
Sure.
So because of that, we entered into this process knowing that we were going to have to take a multi-year approach. And if you look at our FY26 budget, we know that it requires restructuring and reductions in opportunities. And when we sat down with Adam earlier in the year, we said, well, what would it cost if we wanted to just keep everything that we have today? And that would have cost an additional probably $5.2 million from where we were last year. And we looked at the information that we had on hand, and we knew that that would lead to what we felt was an unsustainable increase in tax rates for our community, given taxes increased double digits last year. So our current budget, which we'll get into, is $102.8 million. And if we had wanted to maintain a level service, so same positions, same opportunities, that would have required another $4.2 million. and that's where we landed. FY27, we had to add a couple extra asterisks because we are unclear as to what the impact will be for FY27 and beyond. We've been paying really close attention to what the governor and Secretary Saunders have been talking about for changes in education funding, but at this point, there's just not enough information to assess the impact on CVSD. So that's a big unknown to us at this point. As I said before, one of those challenges that we have is district enrollment. So if you were to look at our district enrollment in 2022, we were closer to 3,900. And if you look at where we are right now, it's closer to 3,650. And you could also see that in our future enrollment projections for CVU. So while we also have these major tax implications going on in the background, we also know that we have enrollment trends that we have to be thinking about. And from a board perspective, when we looked at this, we realized, okay, this is for CVU only. CVU is our high school, obviously. But as of today, there are, as of December, there was 1,269 students. And as we project out to the future, what does that look like? We expect to have declining enrollment through at least 27, 28. And our central office works really hard on this. And this is really just looking at what's the size of each high school class or high school senior class that we expect to have in each of the years versus the upcoming grades behind them, right? So as senior classes graduate, what does that ninth grade class coming in look like? And that's where these projections are based off of. Is that right, Gary?
That is.
Yep.
That's right.
So we know that we have the significant increases that our community withstood last year. We know we have decreasing enrollment trends. We know that we have a lot of uncertainty in the education fund. And that is where we worked with the administration, and they actually came to us and they suggested a overall budget of $103 million. And that would have been a 1% increase versus FY25. So 1%, which would have been approximately a 1% increase. We set that back in October, and the way that it works is our board sets a target, and then the administration works to figure out what that would look like. What would that look like throughout the school? What positions will they have to do in order to meet that? And ultimately, the budget that we approved as a board was $102.7 million. They came in under our $103 million, and that is almost $1 million increase only year over year. And don't forget, a full like inflation impact would have been $5 million total. So this is the lowest increase we've had ever since we've been a consolidated district. We've been consolidated since 2017, and it's obviously does not cover inflation, salary increases, healthcare costs I talked about earlier. So the only other way to get there is to reduce positions and find ways to reduce costs. And you'll see that in the upcoming slides. So we expect that special education spending will increase by 0.8%, general ed by 0.6%, and operations by 2.2%, for an overall budget of $102.7 million, which we think is incredibly fiscally responsible.
Yeah, if I could just jump in there for a second. I just want to underscore the point that Meghan made about this being the smallest increase we've seen. I've been a part of, even though I'm a new superintendent, I've been a part of this district since, actually 1985. But I was hired in 1999 as an English teacher. And never in my sort of wildest dreams over the span of my career in CVSD and primarily at CVU did I imagine we'd be in a spot where we'd be in a 12-month period reducing around 80 positions. So we think about this budget. I'd say we share mixed feelings about it. Mm-hmm. On one hand, we're proud of how responsible it is, and we're proud of the fact that our leadership team has put in the effort to get to a place where we feel like we have maintained as much resource as we can to uphold the values that are at the center of our organization. And then on the other hand, the reduction of 80 positions, there is a loss of resource for our students, and these are people we care about and respect, some longtime friends. So it's been a long, responsible, challenging process. So.
I agree, and Adam has referred to kind of the 80 positions, and I'll get to that in a minute, because it's not 80 positions in this year's budget, but that's really over 2 cumulative years, so we'll get to that in a minute. But kind of the factors that drove this increase, as I said before, where we started with our budget last year, $101.8 million, you add $3.2 million in salaries, and that's an expectation or an assumption. Health insurance, which we know is going up 11.9%. Other benefits that our staff receive. And then obviously, as I said before, the only way to get to that target that we set is through reductions. So those reductions are going to be through personnel reductions and other reductions. And Adam brought up that we've lost 80 positions, and I think that it's really important to underscore the steps that this district and that the board has taken in order to try and understand the impact on our community, and making sure that our school budgets are affordable and that they can be supported by our community. Because I think last year we learned that the increases were just too much in our first vote. So we take this really seriously. And in the last year, in FY25, our first budget did not pass, and the second budget that we put out included 42 positions, 42 FTEs that were reduced, and this budget is another 30, almost 39 FTEs, and that's across all of our schools. There's no part of what we provide to our students that isn't impacted in some way. And we take that really seriously, and we take a lot of responsibility for that, and we feel that, and we also obviously know that the people that this impacts has a very significant impact on them and the students that they serve every day.
One thing I just throw in there, Megan, is one of the things I really respected about our board through this process has been the balance they've tried to strike, and it is challenging to be a board member. You are giving a tremendous amount of time, and people aren't necessarily thanking you all the time. But I think our board has been incredibly empathetic towards both our faculty and staff, but also our community members. We got a pretty strong message last year where people are saying, we may not be able to afford to live in this district anymore. Those people are as much our people as our faculty and staff and our students are. And we've tried to keep that view throughout this process. So I applaud our board, and it's challenging, but we appreciate the balance that they've been able to strike.
Thank you. In this budget, there's 25 professional staff, and when we put it in that categorization, that really includes all of our professionals that are licensed teachers that are kind of follow under that. And we also have staff, which is really support staff. Administrators, there are 3 administrators that we are reducing this year, and then 1 contract professional. Cost per weighted pupil. So I was actually talking with our communications manager earlier today because this budget increases 0.9% year over year. But that top line number isn't actually what determines your per pupil spending or what your tax rate is. As anyone who's been following knows, when you look at and determine your tax rate, it's actually based on per pupil spending, and it's actually not per pupil bodies in the building, but it's weighted students. And those weights are determined based on statute and what was determined in Act 127. So while we have approximately 3,650 students, bodies in the building, there are weighted, the cost per weighted pupil is what actually helps determine your tax rate. Gotcha. So those 3,650 students become 5,685 weighted students. And if you look at our cost per weighted pupil, that is actually up 3.3% year over year. And that's a reflection of last year it was 15,038. This year it's 15,532, which reflects really 2 things. One, as you'll notice, we have less revenue than we did last year, local revenue. And in addition to that, we do have those declining pupil counts that we've talked about before. But even with that, I think a 3.3% increase in per pupil spending is very much below what we believe the state average is, and this reflects the overall time and energy that we've put into really coming up with a responsible budget. This is the part that that Adam talked to before. We have, based on that hard work that we put into this and the really thoughtful process we've put into it, we actually do expect for taxes to decrease across all CVSD towns next year, and they will decrease anywhere from 2.2% down to 4.9% overall. So, when you think about the increases that our district had last year, we view this as a positive and something that we would like to. We were glad to be able to share with the community because they did support us and where we landed. A question we get all the time is, why is it different? Why is the change in taxes different for one town versus another? And that's really a function of something called the CLA, or the Common Level of Appraisal. And I live in Charlotte, and Charlotte's homes were reappraised more recently than many of the other towns in CVSD. So if you look at our CLA, it's actually 93%, which means that if you look at the current market value of homes in Charlotte that have sold versus what their appraised value is, that's about 93%. Whereas for other towns, it's closer to 62, 65%. And the real difference in tax rates is every town in CVSD has the same pre-CLA tax rate of $1.63. The only difference is CLA. And Charlotte taxes, home values have just changed at a different rate than some of the other towns. Everyone else is really a bit closer to 4.5%.
I can see how that's like a question that comes up versus, say, Burlington School District, where it's one town.
Yes.
Versus you have several, and to see those numbers, be like, what's going on there?
Yeah. So that's the reason why you don't get different taxes based on where you live. It's really, you do get different taxes based on where you live, but it's a function of what your home value is, and really changes in that CLA.
Sure.
Another thing I'd like to point out is that all of these tax rates assume that you are not eligible for any tax reduction related to your income or income credit sensitivity. And that's just something that we want to make sure everyone who can receive that does. And this does not take any of that into account. And if you go onto our website or the state of Vermont's website, there's information there that you can go into and understand what the actual impact is. And if you're eligible for a credit, we want you to be able to take advantage of that.
We had a student today at a presentation. We've had a group of students who've gotten really interested in the budget, which is really neat. And
yes.
taking responsibility for both teaching themselves and also educating their peers.
Yeah, that's great.
Which is, to me, the best modeling about what it means to be a citizen is you have to understand these things deeply. And so a 14-year-old asked Meghan today to explain the CLA, and I was like, I don't know how she's going to do this, but I'm glad I'm not answering.
Yeah.
So that is really cool that the students are into it like that, because it's some complicated stuff. It's really complicated stuff that goes into building a budget, and I like to hear that.
Yeah, they're an amazing group. We should get them out here. Gary, I feel like I interrupted you. Were you gonna say something?
Just an interesting point to make this a little simpler. No, it's actually more complex. For those who are paying attention to this year over year, in the yield bill, the legislature actually changed the way the common level of appraisal was applied to the tax rates, where the statewide average CLA is included first into the adjusted equalized tax rate. So our adjusted equalized tax rate, if you can, in the first column and then the adjusted equalized tax rate, you can see a big difference year over year. It doesn't really change the ending final tax rate, but it's a change in calculation, which kind of, it's a little difficult to explain, and if people see the difference from how we presented it last year, that's why.
So I think the headline is tax rates should be going down. So what is the tax impact per $100,000 of appraised value? As I said before, we expect that taxes will go down across all CVSD towns from either 2.2% in Charlotte to 4.9% in Heinsberg. And that impacts, up to $30 to $100 on your appraised value of your home. So if your home is appraised for $500,000 in Heinsberg, you would expect for it to decrease $500. Our budget calendar, we have approved our final budget and our articles that happened on January 21st. Now we are in budget communication mode, so we're here. We'll be in many places next week. I'll be at the Charlotte Senior Center, and I'll be at the Charlotte Library, and other people will be in places throughout our district. And then finally, Town Meeting Day. Early voting starts February 12th, and we hope that everyone begins to vote as soon as possible. That was what we had.
Anything else folks want to add? I think my biggest thing that I want people to know is how can they get in contact with you if they have more questions, and then what is your website, and also where can people find those dates for the more information sessions?
Yep. So our website is cvsdvt.org/ that is our website, cvsdvt.org. And you can go /budget, and that will get you to all of the budget information that you need. And that'll also include a direct email to the school board if they have questions about the school board, and I will be the one answering them unless I need to pull in these guys for help.
Great.
Yeah, I think I'd just throw in, we mentioned how challenging this process is. I'm really proud of our system, and I'm proud of and thankful for the resources that we get from our community. I really hope people support this budget. When a budget goes down, people don't quite understand the implications and what that means to the system. It throws things into chaos. Chaos may be a strong word, but you really, we want our educators to be focused on learning and education and teaching. And so we put our all into this budget. We haven't gone with half measures. We felt like we've really tried to heed what we've heard from our taxpayers. And at the same time, I'm just so the national and state narrative on educators and on education right now, I feel like is so unfair. I get to be in the buildings more frequently than people in our community do, to walk down the hall, to experience what we saw today with students taking responsibility for themselves, for one another. You see our values alive, well, and I hope our community sees that, feels that, and supports us.
I think that's a really great note to end this presentation on, because it's easy to get wrapped up in the numbers and not think about everything else that goes into creating a budget like this. So Meghan, Adam, and Gary, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I also want to thank folks for tuning in to Town Meeting TV's ongoing coverage of local candidates, budgets, and ballot items. You can find this and many more forums at cctv.org/TMD2025 or on our Town Meeting TV YouTube channel. We've mentioned it, but don't forget to cast your ballot on or before Town Meeting Day, which is March 4th. And then you can tune into Town Meeting TV's results recap show that evening at 7 p.m. You can contact your local clerk to find out how to obtain a ballot and to register to vote. And a good reminder that in Vermont, you can register to vote on Election Day. So thank you again for watching and sharing Town Meeting TV. Have a great night.